Yeah, what's good? It's the show here, back with another video, and today we are looking far out to the great pond of there's a pond. Thinking of the analogy, oh fuck it, it's the UK. All right, it's the UK. We took a trip into the UK, except the reason for why we're taking this trip is to look at these TV shows that the Great Britain deems to be, well, great. Anyways,
look at this!
Wow, they were correct. These shows are really brilliant. I just wish they had the support and proper platform for my people, the old USA. Wait, what if I take these awesome UK shows and import them into the US so they truly see what shows they have and carry? Boy, this is going to be just great. What? You don't think I'm in the UK? All right, I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you right now. You, sir.
Hi, my name's David.
Can you say any phrase on camera? Boom! If that's not proof that I'm in England, I don't know what is.
Hi, my name's David. No, mate, I'm from Scotland.
Isn't Scotland around the same place? Man, it feels great to be back home. Only after getting my ass rightfully beat for 6 minutes by pissed Scotsman, of course. And I was only on urgent care for around 12 days. Well, at least now I'm at the house and now I get to take a peek at the UK shows I imported over to get here. Let me just take a see. Oh! Ew! Oh, why does it smell so rancid? UK adaptations. Now, there are two types of UK adaptations out there. You got the likes of The Office and Shameless, who not only does a great job at recapturing the magic of the UK counterpart, but also tries to add new elements to really make it stand out and produce a better product. You got that type, and then there's type 2. Yes, we're diving headfirst into the worst UK to US adaptations out there. Shows that did such a bad job going to the US that not only did it massively fumble its chances in the US, but also had the potential to ruin their legacy and reputation into the UK. Now, am I cheating because it's an unaired pilot rather than a full-on adaptation? Yes. Now, do I care much about it? Not really. Now, there were actually 3 attempts of turning the IT crowd into the US. However, the only one available at the time of this video's release was the first 2007 attempt at it. And oh boy, it was not that hot. Now, do keep in mind, the way I do my reviewing is I look at only the pilot at the US version and whatever the UK episode that the US pilot was based on. Now, the IT crowd. It was a Channel 4 sitcom that lasted for 4 seasons between 2006 to 2010, with a special that came out 3 years later. The show is a workplace sitcom focused on 2 unpopular geeky IT technicians named Roy and Moss, who are at the lowest level of the totem pole in the corporation called Home Industries. What does the corporation specialize in? I honestly don't know. What I do know, however, is that things changed when Jen was brought in to be their manager, despite not knowing anything about tech and only getting there due to her exaggerating her qualifications. And while things do start off rocky between Jen and the other two, the two would later welcome Jen in due to her trying to help them getting higher up on the social ladder, with her attempts usually failing. Now that you know what the plot is, let's talk about the pilot. I kind of explained it already. Yeah, the pilot is essentially just establishing the plot, which yes, duh, but I just want to let you all know. Now, the UK episode I found to be fine. Nothing really stood out to me, but I can definitely see why people like it. There is a funny joke where Roy just falls off his chair upon Jen's arrival, and he just comes back bleeding on one side of his face, and then the rest of the scene just plays out like normal, and then he just passes out fine. Also, the intro theme is really good. I love when shows go all out for the intros, and this 8-bit intro was pretty well done in my opinion. I also like all the actors that are in play. I especially like Moss, and likewise his actor Richard Ayoade. He is so good at playing the intelligent but shy character. I do like all the actors though, and I think they played their roles really well. Can't say the same thing about the US version. Now, let's start with the positive. Richard Ayoade actually stepped in to reprise his role as Moss, and he was again the best actor there. But this time, it was easy. It's not even due to them being bad actors. Hell, Joel McHale's in this one, and I love Joel McHale, even though I really only seen him on Community, The Soup, and that one weird knockoff / spin-off that Netflix made of The Soup back in 2018. I can't tell if it's his delivery, cadence, appearance, or just all three combined, but something about him does not fit Roy's character whatsoever, unlike Chris O'Dowd's portrayal. And I feel like both McHale's Roy and Jen, played by Jessica St. Clair instead of Catherine Parkinson, both comes across as more unlikable in the US counterpart. And I think it's due to both of their deliveries. They just don't fit the role. Another big issue that I want to tackle, because this will be a big pattern for the shows after this, but the US version of the pilot was pretty much the exact same episode as the UK counterpart, word for word, shot for shot, the exact same. Except for some jokes getting cut out and replaced with new ones, and of course the setting. Nothing important changed. You see, on one hand, I get why adaptations end up doing the exact same thing as the original iterations. I get it. Hell, adapting something is taking one story and putting it into another thing. But the thing is, you have to eventually change things up to make things stand out and make it unique. I don't want to keep bringing this up as an example, but screw it, I will. The Office. Many people are aware of this, but the US adaptation of The Office didn't become this iconic popular sensation like it is today. In fact, most people were very divisive in its first season, and a large part of it was due to it borrowing heavily from its UK counterpart without much altering. And sure enough, when season 2 came around and they came up with more original plots, jokes, new characters, and even changed some of the characters' personalities, that's when it started becoming the Office that everyone knows and loves now, even outlasting and outshining the original UK version. If it's an adaptation while still adding new things into the mix, that has the opportunity to stand out from its original counterpart and make it seem like two different shows that the fans both enjoy. While if it's an adaptation that just completely copies the whole flow, word for word, bar for bar, it will just lead people to instantly make comparisons between the two shows. And 9 times out of 10, the original will win. But yeah, TikTok over. Overall, while the US version of the IT crowd is not immensely bad, there's just too many negatives outweighing the positives to recommend over the original. It's probably for the best that NBC canned it before it could go anywhere. Now, it's not like they just gave up after the first attempt, as there were 2 more attempts at making the IT crowd in the US. They tried in 2014 with the creator of shows like Scrubs, Spin City, Ted Lasso, and Clone High, Bill Lawrence stepping in to be a producer for the show, but ultimately it still did not work. They did not give up though, as there was a 3rd crack at it, this time in the start of 2018.
But years have passed and we haven't heard anything beyond what was said in early 2018. Overall, I think at this point the window for a US adaptation of the IT crowd has passed years ago. And I think we could just let that dream go and just keep watching the original.
You always tell me, perhaps.
Oh god, this was such a fuck up of epic proportions. Now, I am aware and have previously watched Mina Memento's video on coupling. Link in the description, it is really good. So I might be saying some things that are familiar to that video, but these are my actual thoughts, and I did my own viewing, just in case anyone wants to point that out. Now, let's go back to 2003, and in the world of TV, the likes of 2.5 Men were making its debut into the airwaves. ABC would bring back TGIF to disastrous results. It really is a running gag at this point. And over on NBC, its acclaimed must-see TV lineup was nearing jeopardy by this point, as 2 of their biggest shows in the form of Frasier and Friends were approaching their final seasons after a decade with both of them on the air. Now for this occasion, I'm only going to be focusing on Friends, and I only really brought up Frasier, despite the fact that it has no context to whatever this inclusion is, because of my friend and fellow YouTuber, the Fraserizer. Yes, I don't know if you can tell, but she's a fan of a certain Kelsey Grammercy. Say it with me, Hank. Why would she not? It is such a great show, and definitely not a huge monumental failure that was canceled at the halfway point of its 10-episode run, and even that Grammer allegedly himself called Warner Brothers in personal request for the show to be canceled. It is an entertaining show. what was I talking about? Oh yes, Friends was ready for its final season at this point, which would not only be a huge blow to NBC's ratings, but more importantly to its must-see TV lineup, as Friends was undeniably its biggest draw of that lineup, hands down. I mean, why else would people tune in for the lineup? Will and Grace? Actually, no, Will and Grace was really good. Scrubs? Oh no, Scrubs was good too. Aha! Inside Schwartz, were people tuning in to watch Breckenmeyer, Bree Franklin, and Bash have daydreams of sports? I didn't think so. Also, side note, I would like to thank whoever greenlit Inside Schwartz, because you indirectly led to Dan Harmon going on to say, and this is a genuine quote, "In September of 2001, everything really changed, and the way we perceive television changed because of a tragedy called the premiere of NBC's Inside Schwartz." This had me genuinely giggling for a hot minute the first time I read it. Anyways, not the point. NBC felt like it needed a hot new show, a hot show as a bit of rated security to keep the viewers tuning out from a post-Friends must-see TV. Despite NBC not realizing that only a select few shows have the instant connection with the viewers on day one. Oh god, it's the Nicktoons situation all over again! Still, their very first attempt at this rated security came in the form of the UK, and in the form of Coupling, BBC's raunchy sitcom about the friendship and dating adventures of 3 guys and 3 girls. Sound familiar? Apparently enough so for NBC, who saw this as a big opportunity. I mean, hey, it's got 6 main characters that hang out with each other just like friends, and hey, Will and Grace is really popping off at this time and had sort of built up a reputation of being this envelope-pushing show. This show could definitely work. Spoiler alert, it did not. It was bad. Now, I personally found the UK pilot I watched to be decent. I don't feel that invested into pursuing more episodes to it, but I can 100% see that PON does have some good elements to it. Now, the US pilot I watched, oh mama, it's not hot. For starters, it has the same issue as the IT Crowd pilot. It's the exact word for word, bar for bar, same as the UK pilot, except they do try to add jokes to the mix, which you'd think would add points, but the jokes they added were...
Hello? Jeff, do you have a condom?
Also the actors, oh my god, the actors! Now, in the on-air Lost pilot of the US version, Emily Rutherford, Melissa George, and Breckenmeyer were initially cast as Sally, Susan, and Jeff respectively, which, 1, makes my Inside Schwartz bit earlier all the more funnier, and 2, saw those 3 get replaced by Sonia Wilger, Rena Sofer, and Christopher Monaghan. And alongside Colin Ferguson, Jay Harrington, and Lindsay Price, I can tell you, Rena Sofer was the only actress I enjoyed in that entire episode. The rest of them were either miscast to all hell or overacted to the point where they gave a bad performance. And this is not to knock anyone's talent. Jay Harrington, for example, great as Ted on Better Off Ted, but he was not good as Steve in Coupling USA. Let me give you kind of a side-by-side of the UK and US.
Listen to me, okay? I know I've tried to say this before, and I know I never seem to get anywhere.
All right, look, I've tried to be gentle and care about your feelings, but I'm just gonna have to put this very simply and very clearly. It's over between us.
Harrington does not fit Steve's role. What makes it even worse is the fact that NBC, in a similar vein to when ABC was heavily promoting Emily Reasons Why Not, except it did not cost NBC reportedly millions and millions of dollars, spent so much marketing and airtime to hype up Coupling as this new big raunchy hit, and it did not work. It lasted 4 out of the 10 episodes made, with the first episode getting 15 million, and by the 4th episode getting 9 million views. With BBC America even airing episodes of the UK version immediately after the US version airing, so that viewers can see how the US version is. And they are right, the US version is awful. With the previous and future shows that I discussed about on this video, I had to make it known as to what the show is about, and basically give background because I obviously know that not everyone has heard about the IT Crowd, or Coupling, or Another example that's not in this video, Catherine Kim, but I feel like there's a strong majority of people who have at least heard of the In-Betweeners. Like, even before making this video, I've heard a lot about the In-Betweeners, as truly there's only a select few shows in the UK that can rival how iconic the In-Betweeners were, that it transcended even past the UK. And as someone who only watched the pilot now after seeing it, I can tell you it is really good. The pilot I watched was really solid at establishing characters and plot, which is about this teenager named Will and his friends in Simon, Neil, and Jay, with it focused on the situations they get into, as well as most importantly, established the humor. It is really funny. I like a lot of cringe comedies, and this one actually does cringe comedy really well, and I would be enticed to watch more. Anyways, this show was a big hit. So much of a hit, in fact, that got the attention of one ABC, who in 2008, while just finishing Series 1, approached the creators of In-Betweeners, Ian Morse and Damon Beasley, about producing a pilot for an adaptation of the In-Betweeners. Now, nothing is really known about the ABC pilot outside of the fact they never got picked up. However, hope was not lost. Or was it? Because in late 2010, it was announced that a US adaptation of the In-Betweeners was picked up by MTV. Wait, hold up. Might be in my notes. Wait, I'm not? Really, MTV? Look, I'm sorry, but out of all the networks that could have picked up the show, we go with early 2010s MTV? That was only pretty much either the trashiest of trashy reality TV shows or ridiculousness. Well, at this period, MTV was experimenting with scripted TV shows, but outside of Teen Wolf and maybe Awkward, none of them really was successful. Still, they decided to take a chance with MTV, but really outside of being credited as executive producers, it seemed like the creators of the UK show had little to no involvement with the show itself, with the majority of the development being ran by Brad Copeland, who was previously a writer on News Radio, My Name's Earl, and Arrested Development. Sadly, he did not use his expertise when it came to the show, because this show sucks! First, the casting. Think of the miscasted acting mistakes that I mentioned earlier, and expand that by tenfold because it is shocking the amount of casting mistakes made for this show. Look, I'm not saying they have to look exactly precise, but like, it should not be that hard. To be fair though, you can honestly convince me that those are two different friend groups entirely because they butchered the shit out of the likes of Neil and Jay, with Neil seemingly having a lobotomy while making the export, while Jay...
Yeah, I'd renob her in a second.
I'm not gonna ask what that means.
A renob is boner backwards. I'd literally renob her so hard that my penis would be pushed back in my body.
That was really bad.
They also decide to feature a new storyline which sees Jay being in a relationship with an actual fucking middle schooler, but I frankly don't want to discuss it beyond that. Generally, what the fuck were they actively smoking while producing that? This version of the In-Betweeners somehow was given 12 episodes when it was arguably 13 too many. I have no much else to say, but there's so much more to the levels of shit this adaptation. So I highly recommend Lombardi's videos on the UK versus USA In-Betweeners, where bless his heart, he somehow looked at every single episode of In-Betweeners USA. Outside of that, I'm done talking about this shit show. But hey, at least that's the only show that MTV could have fucked, right? Right? Oh god, please don't make me say it a third time!
Kids, won't you step outside for a second?
Fuck!
Dear Lord, that's the loudest profanity I've ever heard.
How many times do we have to teach you this? Oh wait, this actually came out a year before the In-Betweeners. Huh. Well, Skins is a show that made its arrival on E4 back in 2007. Now, I can't really tell you all the lore since there's a lot to unpack with Skins as a whole, but the pilot that I watched sees it as a comedy drama following the lives of 8 sixth form students. The thing about Skins is that it is so unafraid to push the envelope of storytelling. Now, I really can't discuss much of the storylines because I personally don't want my video to be age restricted, but it is a really dark show with some very dark themes attached to it. But even then, it was a huge hit, spawning 7 series between 2007 and 2013. So much so that MTV, who was looking to rebrand the network around this time, approached Brian Elsey into making an American adaptation of Skins. And while initially hesitant, Elsey saw MTV as the one with the best direction and took a chance. The process of hiring writers was very rigorous, with Elsey reading 400 different writer scripts before settling on a team of 6. With the pilot getting picked up in August of 2009 and the full series getting picked up in May of 2010 before finally airing in January 17th of 2011. And what do I think of the pilot? It's fine. There. I would not consider it atrocious whatsoever. Like, I would watch this hands down over any episode of the US In-Betweeners any day of the year. But there is some glaring flaws still, don't get it twisted. Like the previous entries, this show pretty much just uses the UK script word for word, which makes me wonder, why did he look at over 400 different scripts if that is the case? There is, however, one clear change, as for whatever reason they replaced Maxine, a gay male dancer, with T, a lesbian cheerleader. Now, I don't really know why they changed characters, but the issue is in the way they booked the story between Maxine and Tony, and T and Tony. As well in the UK, it was Tony's sexual fluidity that saw him gain an attraction for Maxine, but in the US version, T just starts gaining feelings for Tony, sleeps with Tony on 2 occasions, and even starts questioning her own sexuality, which at this point was a very tired and dated cliche at this point. Also, another general issue with this show and some of the other shows I mentioned is that there are some shows that just can't work adapting to other markets because they are so of that country it would not work anywhere else. For example, in my opinion, the In-Betweeners could not work outside the UK, and look how it turned out. And I think Skins is a prime example of a show that just can't not work outside of the British style. It really could not, because it's so British that I don't see it working in any other country. Also, the show, even despite it being TVMA, still had a lot of censorship, because what you can get away with in the UK doesn't always mean you could get away with it in the States, which also hampered the likes of coupling. However, I feel like this adaptation is best known for how much of a stir it caused with several conservative groups due to its depictions of boinking and drug use with its not-of-age actors. With the PTC, no relation to the RTC, Bull Buchanan Forever My Goat, even going as far as to write a letter to the Department of Justice to get a Club Penguin charge against Skins USA, which unsurprisingly didn't work, but also kind of did, as that scandal led to Taco Bell, Wrigley, GM, Subway, Foot Locker, H&R Block, Schick, Proactive, El Oreo, Curacao, and Kraft all pulling their advertising one by one following the scandal. And combine that with the mixed reception and viewership decline, except for the final few episodes, led to the show getting canceled after just 10 episodes. Okay, before we get started, let me give a content warning. I usually don't talk about this stuff. I usually try to stray away, but sadly I can't, because sadly there will unfortunately be an emphasis on Rob Schneider. I know. Now, in terms of sitcoms, Schneider had 3 where he was the lead. The latest was Real Rob, which was really ass, and only lasted 16 episodes. Even worse was the one before that in 2012 called Simply Rob, which was even worse and only lasted 8 episodes. But his first foray into sitcom land was back in 1996. NBC seemingly wanted to sort of dip their toes into making UK adaptations, and they decided to take its first stab by ordering an adaptation of the 1992 sitcom Men Behaving Badly. Now, Men Behaving Badly is a simple concept. It's about men behaving badly.
Well, that and also about two roommates, one with a girlfriend who usually are just desperately wanting women, and then it gets turned upside down when a female joins the apartment. Shenanigans naturally ensue. It's a simple show. Meanwhile, men behaving badly is like what would happen if you asked ChatGPT to make a script for an adaptation. It's very mediocre writing, with a lot of the gags being stuff you would see in any basic sitcom out there. Like, I could bet money that all of the gags here were recycled to maybe, let's say, according to Jim. It's also a late 90s sitcom, so there's of course just casual homophobia.
Yo, he's a periodontist. What do you think that means?
Oh, boy.
What, I'm gay?
To give some credit, Rob Schneider wasn't too terrible in the pilot I watched. He wasn't exactly good either, but in Rob Schneider standards, that's a passing grade. Keep in mind, Rob has 8 Razzie nominations in total. The actor playing Kevin in the show is terrible. The actress playing Sarah, though, was pretty good. I don't know how to describe this archetype, but both of the main characters are very dumb. While Rob's character is just an asshole, like him just going through his new upstairs neighbor stuff without her knowing. It's just very much not good, but also I was fully expecting to play in the show, but it wasn't downright awful like I thought it would. It's definitely not a show I would recommend, though, but it isn't gonna make your eyes and ears bleed. So, that's all for this video. I was originally going to discuss Kath and Kim before I realized that it is an Australian show, so I'm not going to do that in this video. But if you do want to see a more in-depth look at the failed US adaptation of Kath and Kim, then go ahead and let me know. Thank you so much for the continued support from each and every one of you lovely people. Again, thank you for your support, I love you all, and I bid you adieu.